Sue Peterson.
Scott Sylvester, Keyberg Mail,
Bill Adnoli.
ex officio.
Lena Gagliano, Keyberg.
Heidi Hinkle.
Chuck Nickel.
Granite County Commissioner.
Yes.
Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, today we're going to discuss the Granite County Growth Policy. I took our coordination booklet into Linda Bork, told her what we're about, and I told her I want her to read that so she would understand when we come to her. And today, I want to, I'm going to kind of re-educate us a little bit on that fire, soil, because if we're going to have, tell the Forest Service, how we're going to coordinate with them, we got to be really well educated on what we're doing. And there's so much what happens in a fire. And I'll start out in 1910. We're going to talk about soil. This won't take too long. I just got a bunch of pictures I want to share with you guys. Oh, first of all, I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to give this out. This is the executive order President Trump signed on. You want to take one, Sue, and just pass it around?
Sure.
He passed it at the end of December, but this is how he wants to manage the forest, and this will be coming to our Forest Service. So please read that. It's pretty good reading. Okay. Now this right here is after a forest fire, you have different levels of damage to your soil. If you just take one. In here it talks about this. I hope you guys read all this stuff. I got this from the extension agent in Moscow, Idaho. It talks low severity, moderate severity, high severity. So just take one and study it.
Now, what is that on again?
This is about soil after a
Okay.
forest fire. People think it's just okay to burn up the forest, but there's a lot of damage done. Now this picture here, I took this last summer up at Lone Pine Ridge. This was a forest, this has three things in it. It was logged in about 1989, 85 maybe. You can see the growth came in, about 30 years growth, and then there was a massive fire. It destroyed the soil. You can see that it's blackened.
I had to count 6,000 cones per acre there to get those trees.
Yeah, but I walked all through that forest. I could find no new growth. That was 20 years ago, and no new growth.
You mean no new growth with the trees?
Yes,
But lots with the vegetation.
there is some there, yes.
Well, I mean, a lot. Look at bear grass,
Yes,
And I don't know what the little blue flower is, a penstemon maybe.
yes. But I'm just talking forest. Now, if you wanted a forest to come back in, it ain't gonna come, because of soil damage. And there is a way
But
you can,
with succession though, I mean, it will come, shrubs will come, and then what's the first tree that comes is lodgepole after a fire? And how many cones did you count?
Well, for logging, we had to count 6,000 cones per acre. We had to make sure the loggers left at least 6,000 cones per acre to assure adequate regeneration.
Oh, okay. So,
And so
this a lodgepole
that's a lodgepole stand.
yeah.
stand? So, do you think there are cones in the soil?
No,
So
no,
far?
they're all burned up.
Every
What little
cone
few
burned up.
cones were on the little trees.
Okay.
If you go to a fire, you
I don't
guys
know,
can.
I like the open myself, and I
You
think
can,
dogs like it also.
If you want to, it becomes hydrophobic, the soil. You can check it. I thought this was interesting. To check for water repellent soil, that means that it's totally destroyed. Scrape your soil away, get down to, the ash, get down to the soil. If water droplets bead on the surface for 10 to 40 seconds, it is considered moderately water repellent. If it beads for more than 40 seconds, it's considered strongly water repellent, meaning it's sterilized, it's damaged permanently. Now here, fire damage. I grew up in Oregon. These are amazing pictures right there. That's the Tillamook fire. What was sad about that, it was all old growth. I hate to say it was a logging outfit that started it. It was just terrible. Isn't that awful? The erosion and stuff.
I appreciate your honesty.
The loggers did it. You know how they did it though? It was a climatic change. It was very dry and drought. They were just driving a log across another log. It started a spark. It was so hot and dry. Now, this was the fire of 1910. This came through 3 states, Montana, Idaho, a little bit of Washington, and up into Canada. It almost burned Wallace, Idaho down. But here again, it was a very drought year. And in that Tillamook fire, 3 years later, Bend, Oregon burned down. That's where I grew up, around that area. The whole town burned down. So, but that is pretty. Fire is so destructive. You know, it's just not to mention how poisonous. So what is the next thing here? I'm just going to quickly run this. Oh, now Sue, you brought up prescribed burns, and I'm thinking, you know, in that thing that President Trump put, you know, he wants to do prescribed burns, and he wants to do a lot of logging. Sometimes I think it's almost too little, too late. But, okay, this, now with prescribed burns, you know, there's pros and cons with it. This is a picture of Missoula. Last summer, a prescribed burn happened over in Idaho. They called Missoula and said, guess what? You're going to get a bunch of smoke. So with prescribed burns. And they said, how long? They said, we don't know. But it settled in there for over a week. And it got to really bad levels. You can pass that around if you want. Now, also, prescribed burns aren't always perfect. You must know the Weaver Ranch down there.
Oh, sure.
You
Well,
know about the
that was an accident that started that one, from, again, a forester, wasn't it?
It was a prescribed burn. That's what it says here.
Well, they sued, Weaver sued, there's a lawsuit over that. I got excused
They
from
got
the
it.
jury.
I got the
Right.
got the deal in the paper. Yeah, they
Right.
got it. They did.
Right. But it was, didn't one of the employees, some forester started it, and then instead of putting it out, he ran for his life, and that's why they're able to sue.
But it was a prescribed burn. It wasn't like a major forest fire. They were.
Well, it was an accidental burn.
You can call it that.
Well,
The
I got
Davis-
excused from jury duty because
You were on that, huh?
I got excused.
Okay. Now, the Davis fire in 2010, I think, is that when, there was a Mannix fire. And then there was a Rich Grady Ranch fire. It started with a prescribed burn. They sued the federal government. Of course, it ended up in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where you never win those cases down there. They lost. They wanted $750,000. They didn't get it. And in the Bitterroot, other cases, 2000, there were 100 landowners sued the federal government because of a controlled burn. It burned 10 homes down. And the reason you can't sue the federal government is because they have what is called the Federal Tort Claims Act. You just can't sue them. Because they'll say, oh, you can sue us, but we'll decide if you can win or not, you know. Now, here's another controlled burn. In 2000, Cerro Grande prescribed a burn in New Mexico. It got away from them and burned 19,000 acres and burned 250 homes. In Colorado, 2012, a prescribed burn got away and killed 3 people and burned 27 homes. And in
So who's starting those prescribed burns?
it's a Forest Service.
Okay, because
Yeah.
over at Townsend this year, a rancher started a prescribed burn, you know.
The ones I'm talking to are strictly Forest Service
Oh, okay.
that they started. We almost were burned out by a prescribed burn that some neighbors
Yeah.
started. That's different. In Florida, a prescribed burn sparked 36 homes, burned 36 homes down. And now the Weaver Ranch, it was a state, and they sued. And usually you do better with a state because it's settled in state. It doesn't go to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Do you guys know anything about the Ninth Circuit down there? They are very bad, very liberal. When things down there go to the Supreme Court, 90% of them are overturned.
I love the Ninth Circuit Court.
I know you do, because they settle a lot of environmental stuff. If I was environmental, I would love them too. That's the truth. But anyway, the Weaver Ranch, they sued. It took a long time, but I believe they got $730,000. The state did pay them. But now, here's a talk
Can I
about.
take a look at
Yeah. Which one did you want?
that? The Weaver one.
Yeah, right there. This came from the Department of Interior about the smoke from the wildfires in California this last year. Talk about climate change. You know, this really does affect it. The new analysis showed in 2018, California wildfires emitted as much carbon dioxide as an entire year's worth of electricity in California. I mean, it just really put it out there.
But the Weaver fire was a backfire, and which is
Yeah.
different than a prescribed burn. And if
Yeah.
you're talking about backfires, I mean, that's totally different than prescribed burns. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
When
right.
we look at it, Lolo, what was that last year, the year before, where the backfire was a disaster? But they're two different things.
Yeah. But still, they were doing it, backfires can get out of hand too, though, can't it?
Oh, right, like
Yeah.
the Lolo, yeah.
Yeah. And you gotta think, is it worth it? And also, controlled burns cause a lot of smoke in the air.
Right,
Constant.
but just, we do have to make the distinction, a backfire and prescribed burn are two different things. And sometimes in desperate situations, I'm sure you'd agree, a backfire is the prudent course of action. I mean, it doesn't always work, but,
Seldom.
yeah, so, but sometimes would you give
I
it
mean,
a?
we're not talking thousands of acres like we do now.
Mhm.
Back in the day, you do, maybe 200 feet, 300 feet, you
Mhm.
build a line, try to go direct, you couldn't go direct along the fire's
Right.
edge, so you'd have to burn out or backfire,
Right,
to another, but it's not to the degree they're doing now. I mean, not even close.
yeah.
But Sue, I would be so afraid to do controlled burns in Granite County. One boo-boo, it can wipe a rancher out, destroy his livelihood, burn all his range. We've been so lucky, more ranchers, their grazing lands in the summer haven't been burned out.
Well, this
I
is the
know.
point I
Right.
tried to make
Yeah,
earlier
we have been
in
lucky.
the summer, that they're using lightning for controlled burns, okay, in the summer. They're doing that. They basically admitted it.
And to let it burn, you mean like
To
that?
let it burn.
Yeah.
Because if you do a controlled burn, you look in your forest plan, and it'll say that they have to do a NEPA document, and
Mhm.
usually an EIS, and they don't wanna do an EIS. They don't wanna do the work. So they're just sitting around, letting the lightning strike, and then saying, oh, we're gonna manage that. We're gonna manage it all summer.
Mhm.
And then it takes off, and of course, they know what it's going to do
Yeah.
there. And I put that into a letter that I wrote, I'm pretty sure, that that's what they're doing. And
The reason I brought this up, because in President Bush's executive order,
Or President Trump.
Trump, he wants to use controlled burns and logging and all that. And if we're going to advise the county commissioners what to go to the Forest Service, do we want to do this? Do we want to use controlled burn? To me, I think it's almost too little too late. There's so much timber out there and it's in terrible shape. But I just wanted to show that there's some cons going with those controlled burns. And I would hate to be responsible that I was part of a deal that, in our growth policy changed it, that, some of our ranchers could lose their ranch land. I think that'd be terrible.
here's the problem right here. I don't know if you guys read this. In the early 1990s, Forest Service Chief Jack Ward Thomas backed away from the blanket fire suppression strategy, declaring that some fires should be fought and others allowed to burn. Fire is neither good nor bad, Thomas said. That's the whole problem.
And here it
That-
is, right
In the
here.
1990s, and that's exactly when it started, that they
I'm glad you
started
brought that up, Chuck.
letting fires burn more and more, and they build up the fire organization all over the Forest Service to do that, and, so.
But Chuck, don't you think after the 1910 fire, the Forest Service developed that policy that, what was the name of it? They put it out like that morning if they could. And there was such a fuel load that it really causes catastrophic burns. And I think that, I'm gonna say it again, there is a place for fire, probably not August 1st of any year with climate change. We gotta recognize climate change. But I think there is a place for fire. But it all started with this.
And I'm not denying that at all.
Okay.
But my point is, from our last meeting, and Bill talked about this too, is if you go out there and fight every fire, you're not gonna get every fire. But you should be out there fighting every fire. And then the ones that get, there's some fires that are gonna take off in 5 minutes and they're gone, and some, the next day they're gone, and before you can get there.
So when was the Forest Service created.
Okay, I want you to, this is what I'm gonna do.
Just,
About 1895, it was called the Organic Act, and from then
Right.
on, but I want
And-
you guys to write this down, write, and Google this. I wasn't gonna print this out, but if you will Google this, you can read how the Forest Service has evolved, how it came about, and who is controlling it. It's called Reinventing the United States Forest Service. Just Google that, and you'll come up with this right here. It shows you exactly, it's in like in a big circle, how the Forest Service has evolved, how their concepts have changed, and how they've been bad. But right here, Chuck was right. Like you'll hear environmentalists say the reason the forests are so bad because we aren't allowed to burn it anymore. Well, this might be a big part of it. Logging stopped about 1990 on federal lands. You can see that. Sue, just go ahead and take one.
the point I was gonna make was,
Huh?
the point I was gonna make was, the fire of 1910 was unbelievably destructive in terms of property and human life.
Yeah.
And it didn't come about because of any kind of management of our forests. The Forest Service had just come into existence. So
Very young,
the
5 years
forest
ago.
was basically, the forest was being the forest. You
Yes,
know, there was a
exactly.
fair amount of logging, but there was all this public ground, and there was no management of it at all. And I think the 1910 fire is a good example of what results if you don't have active management of the forest. Because I don't think we've seen a fire like that since. It was just unbelievable what happened.
Terrible.
And there was no management basically at all. The Forest Service, there probably were very few people working, and they were still trying to figure out their mission. And so I think that's something we want to keep in mind when we think about the 1910 fire. It came about in a climate of non-management of the forest.
That's what you'll find in that.
Well, it was also really dry.
There you go.
And
Climatic
it
change
was really
again.
dry, and as far
Yes.
as, what it burned, I don't know how much was Forest Service, but you look at the mines, you think about the Anaconda Company and around Wallace and around Anaconda, there wouldn't have been a tree left within 10 miles, and look at how Wallace burned. You know, because you know as well as I do, the mines needed timber, right? Right.
Correct.
Right, and so,
We all need timber.
right, but you know what the mining companies, you know how they log. I mean, you know that, we all know that.
Well,
They
did
took
I mention
everything.
to you before, when the Anaconda Company owned their 600,000 or 700,000 acres of Montana forest land, they logged it on a sustained yield basis. And that land only got a giant haircut after the Anaconda Company was forced to sell that ground to Champion,
Dropped in 1990.
okay?
Well,
So-
but when there was the
so
mill at
I'm-
Bonner, I
I'm
don't
just
believe
saying
they logged that
You
as
can
sustainable.
look that up if you wish,
I
but the
will.
Anaconda managed their forest for sustained yield. And that's why there was such a tremendous amount of wood there once the Chase Manhattan Bank actually controlled Anaconda Company and they controlled Champion. And they just basically caused that land to transfer, and then they ripped out the trees, you know, by the billions of board feet. Anaconda was a wise forest manager. Just saying.
I'm just saying, you can still see the damage around Missoula, and look at all that timber that's still laying on the ditch banks that's just the timber that sunk, that didn't make it to industrial use.
You
It
know,
doesn't look
back
very
there
wise to
too,
me.
don't forget, in the turn of the century, they didn't have good logging equipment like we have now. We can really manage the forests now in a big way. You know, we don't hurt the forest floor, we say, you know, all this mechanical, it's amazing.
It's my
what you can
understanding
do
that
with it.
those logs that are down in the former river bottom or whatever are worth quite a bit of money today.
I'll bet they are.
And so those logs got put in the bank.
Well,
And now there are some withdrawals from the bank.
it would, when we were building our house, why we looked very enviously at all those logs, but they're so full of sand and stuff that they would destroy the saws, so they're worthless. They can't even give those beautiful things away, and they're like 100 years old. You can just imagine how gorgeous they are. Having spent considerable time in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, like in the 60s and 70s, you can see what fire did. If you ever go through the, like, White River Park, this huge park, and it's ponderosas, and it's just unbelievable, because fire was a part of it. It took out all the underbrush, and here you have these huge ponderosas, probably 50 feet apart. And so that's an example of fire at its best, and that's the way it was for
And I'll tell you
thousands
what,
of years.
see, ponderosa doesn't grow real close. It grows real tall, so when the fire goes through, it cleaned out the brush like
Right.
that and left a beautiful forest.
Exactly.
But these lodge poles aren't quite like that.
Right.
You know, it burns hot, it sterilizes the soil. You know, here again, we gotta be smart on what kind of trees we're dealing with out here. And now, I'm gonna show you some pictures, and Chuck, I'm gonna give you credit for this one. Many years ago, Chuck said, when he was in the Forest Service, he said, you should use a clipper to build a fire line, you know. So, this is the 2017 fire. Our clipper did do it. Now, years ago, did we use a cat to build a fire line and all
Oh,
that?
yeah, they're a big mess.
Okay, here is the fire line. We were part builders of this, and here's the top of it looking down. But you can see, it works. The fire came right up and stopped on that fire line. You can go ahead and pass this around. And here's a distant picture of it right there. This was up on that fire up by Lone Pine Ridge, you know, where it was.
Candich Logging Company has spent a lot of time up in that neck of the woods.
Oh, we've done a lot.
I remember when you guys logged up in there in the 70s.
Oh, we've been logging forever. Gosh, I've been married to Joe for about 50 years. Now, this is kind of neat. On the 2017 fire, they thinned this really good right there above the road. So if a fire swept through, it wouldn't damage the soil. But if it got through, if it hit this force, it would really damage it. And up on top, it shows, this is a forest, this just burned. This is a new burn. You can tell by that. But the soil got black, and whether it's sterilized, I don't know. I wish I would have known about that percolator test you can do, you know, to see if it was.
But how long does the soil stay sterile?
It can do it forever still. If it's really bad, it will never, ever be good again. But like that thing I just gave you had 3 levels of damage to your soil. And like Sue says, when a fire sweeps through, if it's quick, it actually does great things to the soil. But when it sterilizes it, you kill all the microbes in your soil, and it's dead.
I can tell you a little story on this sterilization on the coast. If you burn, well, where I was in Washington, on the west side, if you burn over 3,000 feet in elevation, the soils were thinner. And so what we do, back they did in those days, is we actually broadcast burn logging. So you'd have a logging unit, they'd put a fire line around it, so we go in the fall, in October, and burn off that slash. Sometimes the slash was 6 feet deep, sometimes a couple feet deep. Okay. Some of the guys started noticing that we were sterilizing the soil above 3,000 feet. And the ranger, we had a really good ranger, and he looks at it and he goes, okay, no more slash burn over 3,000 feet.
Really? Because it's just too thin, it can hurt
Yeah,
it
too
really
thin
bad.
soil, yeah.
Interesting. Maybe that's why some of that got sterilized.
The fire boys got a hold of it, and they fought it, and they ended up burning
Oh,
anything over 3,000 feet or whatever, and started just making meadows. Yeah.
I didn't know that elevation.
Happened right on the district.
Little internal politics.
Yeah,
bad.
that's short-sighted, isn't it?
I'm going to show you a little bit of logging. Remember I wanted to take you out to that grant program?
Right.
This is an SMZ, it's along the river. We're not allowed to have a clipper in there. The DNRC came out this day, the kids from Anaconda and from Phillipsburg. I tried to get this in the paper, they wouldn't put it in, isn't that too bad? It had all the kids from Phillipsburg, and the kids were in the machines, and we had a lunch up there that day, it was so fun. But we got special permission from the DNRC because the ground, he came out to look at the ground, it wasn't, we could log it there with our clipper without disrupting it.
Where's that, on Rock Creek then?
That's on the Middle Fort of Rock Creek. Yeah, the
Okay.
Middle fork and rock.
That's very
Now, this is on Ann Sanders Ranch. Now, look at the soil, the microbes are good, logging doesn't hurt the soil, you know. And you can see with the new kind of machinery, you can save the little trees. And we took all the dead, all the blown over stuff. And this is a grant program we got, and we just closed it out. They were very satisfied how it came. All the trees that left were alive, very healthy. It's going to be a beautiful forest.
But
And-
do you leave a dead tree now and again
A dead tree.
for the woodpeckers?
We have to leave.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes,
We used to leave
absolutely.
them, and I'd have to tell loggers,
Oh,
if it's a
absolutely.
hazard, you could cut it. If it wasn't a hazard, you could leave it.
Yeah, we do,
Yeah,
we
we
always
check.
do that. We always do that still. Now, here's another picture of it. But I just wanted you to look at the soil. And the state was very happy how it came out.
Is this the place that Eva owns now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you know Eva.
Well, I met her once.
Okay. And these are great loggers here. Kevin, my son, and my nephew. They're smiling, but look at the soil. But these guys are great loggers. They are great educated on managing the forest.
Is his name Candage too?
Yeah, that's Carl Candish. That's my brother-in-law's and we're sisters married to brothers.
Right, that would
That'd
be
be called-
Tammy's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tammy's,
okay.
well, you know Tammy.
Right,
And then
sure.
that Kevin is my
Oh,
son.
well, that's-
But they, you know, Kevin's part of that real Montana. But this I want to show you too. This is a picture, it was taken, this clear cut, it was a complete clear cut out on McKay Gulch. There's that's me with my little son, Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah, that was 30 years ago that this got clear cut. The soil wasn't damaged. And I would have to say, we were working on the Bower Ranch, and I had to say, I thought it looked pretty bad, this logging site. I go down there, it was rip and tear, and the mud and the muck. I thought, oh my Lord. But you know what? That came in better than a lot of stuff we do. And here it is.
Well, because
This is it, 30
it was
years later.
30 years ago when we actually had rain.
That helps a
That was
lot.
before climate change really
Yeah,
hit.
this is that section now. It's one of the best elk habitats. People come from all over the United States. Jim Lovell, Apollo 13, he comes there. Sam Dunkerman from
This is your
Anheuser-Busch.
cabin?
Huh?
This is on
No, this is,
Oh.
these people stay at my cabin
Yeah,
when they come
okay.
hunting.
I thought
But
maybe
it
the
shows
booklet.
how that clear cut is,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just wonderful elk habitat.
Patty, who are these people in this picture here?
That's me with Kevin, my son Kevin. You can see a lady with dark hair holding a little boy.
Right, and
That's me.
somebody else
Didn't
there.
Okay.
recognize the hairstyle.
Yes, the
Some-
other people are, we were having our porch done by Ed Eck. Do you know Ed Eck in Anaconda? He's a contractor. Ted Eck, I don't know if you know that.
Okay,
That
no,
was his family. We went hiking in there. And that cabin was very interesting. That's kind of where that lost trip through paradise kind of happened on the Stevens. But this was another cabin there, and when you went in, it had holes where they could put their guns out, you know? It was kind of neat. But I'm just showing you how logging is really good. You know, it doesn't destroy the soil. It comes in, and you can replant whatever kind of trees you want, you know, but
So make it more like a plantation.
no, I would rather just let it grow natural.
Yeah, I would too.
You know, I like it
The way
natural.
Weyerhaeuser does it,
They're more commercial, that way
Oh,
they stay
yeah.
off the Forest Service land.
Right,
Is that good
exactly.
though? Isn't that good
I-
maybe? Use commercial trees? I don't know.
I don't know, I'm mixed
Yeah.
emotions there.
But you can see what great elk habitat that is. I mean, they get elk every year up there. Yeah. But I just wanted to show you, you know, the pros and cons of contrast burning. And I'm with you, you know,
Right.
I can see, and there's some areas that probably would be good. I just hate the smoke, you know, or if you could get away. I mean, that's terrible for Burnwood Citizens Ranch, that
Right,
we
well,
lost it.
I.
And where the
I've
Forest
done that
Service
yet.
doesn't reimburse them, you know.
Right,
I feel bad about that, and I don't know,
yeah, nobody wants a ranch to burn.
no. And I think we've been lucky, because just your summer range burns up, you're done, aren't you?
Right, oh, yeah.
Because
I
you're gonna
know.
buy hay, you know, for your horses and all that, so.
You know, I always feel that balance is so good, because if you get too much of one thing, it doesn't work. Too
I
much
think
of
if
burning
you would read that
everything.
about the Forest Service,
Yeah.
the cycle of it, it shows it was never perfect, you know. But we've learned a lot, hopefully, when we come around, you know. Total environmentalist doesn't work, and total clear cuts don't work,
Yeah.
you know.
You know, if you log,
but that-
everything.
But because we're going to be advising our county commissioners to coordinate with the Forest Service, we want to know what we want to put out there, you know, and I'm for a lot of logging myself to provide jobs, but good logging, you know,
Yes.
not,
Good luck.
you know, thinning, mainly thinning, I would think. And you know what, I don't understand, Do they do much post and pole around here anymore?
I don't know.
There's
Have you-
some, you have the pole yard there, down by where Mark Medish lives.
Oh, yeah, we've got Big Sky Shades,
Glen-
we've got
Glen
Friendly
Posey.
Forest, Post and Poles, Posey, Fenward.
Yeah, Fenders.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like the post and polers.
Have you guys ever been out to where they've done post? I'm sure you have, haven't you? Post and poles. It's beautiful. They don't clear cut it. They just thin it. They're all, and then they have these little berm piles. I would like to see the Forest Service do a lot more of that. you
Right,
know,
right.
They did a lot more when the Romero family was here.
Who's the Romero family?
Ramon Romero.
I
There
don't know
was
them.
Angel, I remember Angel.
Ramon was from Las Mochas, and Ramon lived in Parkerville for quite a while, and his family and extended family, they did a tremendous amount of post and pole work. Ramon was quite a dandy. He had a wife up here and a family of about 6 kids. Then he also had a different wife down in Mexico with 5 or 6 kids, and he'd spend the winter down there with wife number 1 or 2, and then the summer up here, and man, oh man, did those people work.
Oh, they could work.
They worked.
What year are you talking about that they would have been
Oh,
here?
this would have
I
been,
remember
Eighties.
when I
Oh,
worked.
we've been here pretty
80s and
recently.
They were
90s.
here a lot.
Yeah, his
Ah.
kids were in school here.
Do you remember him, Heidi?
I remember Angel, and there was another one that was real
Well,
nice.
let's see.
Angel was a little scary, but
Oh.
Yeah,
hopefully he'll probably.
yeah. Jose was in school with my son
Yeah.
Keith.
They were
Oh,
all.
So
okay, so you
Keith
know
is
him.
Keith is about 33 now or something
that's
like that. So,
Do they do much post and polling now? Does the Forest Service encourage it?
you know, I haven't followed that carefully, but I just delivered fuel out to Boise yesterday, and there is a big yard full of wood there, and
Yeah, we haul into them.
they're processing to beat the band,
Yeah,
and you know, that's smaller material.
yeah.
You don't see the little trucks going
I
on the
know,
highway much
right,
anymore.
exactly.
I think
Still-
they're getting it from the loggers, you know, they go in there.
I
with
still
Yeah.
see one of the little Mexican trucks going to Drummond. I don't know if it goes, I'll ask Glenn. Maybe I'll put a note in there when I send him his bill.
I can ask Fendler's too. I'm gonna see Doreen tomorrow.
Anyway,
see
the
if they do-
Romeros.
Yeah, see how that's.
I wonder if that's something we should encourage the Forest Service to open up more post and polling, you know, for.
It must,
Saw logs.
you
and post
know,
and poles.
it fills a niche there, you know, and it must be viable because we do have, you know, a few.
And doesn't it give the other trees, I think, the littler ones that are left, you know, they would get bigger, wouldn't they, not competition?
If you
Oh,
thin,
And I wanted to show you, on the, places that are logged, when it comes back like that clear cut here, it wasn't damaged, you know, by the pine beetle, cause it was a new forest and healthy and. So what do we wanna do? We're here to vote on coordination. Shall we just, vote on that right now, that we wanna put coordination with the Forest Service? We
Well,
definitely wanna do
Yeah, I
that.
thought we were gonna, have ideas on.
Yeah,
what we wanted.
Yeah, but I was gonna break it down and vote on certain things, but we definitely
You're the
wanna,
boss.
So we're on the growth policy now. right?
yeah, we are.
So I haven't had a chance to read the growth policy because I have a real problem with my internet right now.
Uh-oh.
And I can just, I know it's a bummer, I can just look at it for a few minutes and then it's like, everything starts jumping. And so I was gonna look into purchasing, you know, growth policies and, you know, it'd be $12 a book. But I talked to Linda just now and she would run them off for us for free.
Okay.
And I just think if we all had a chance to read the entire growth policy before we started, that would be good, because
Okay.
I think it should be in context. From what I read of the growth policy, you know, they do address logging and recreation and clean water and all that stuff. So I think we should have a really good handle on the entire policy before we start to concentrate.
I agree. I think a little more study is a good idea.
All right, that's all right.
We don't want to go off half-cocked, because I think it's kind of important.
Yeah,
And as far as coordination with the Forest Service, I think that's a given that we are aiming for coordination, but we just don't know yet. We don't have all of our facts together, you know, to get specific. But generally, I think we already decided one of our main purposes is to facilitate coordination between the Forest Service and our county commission, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We could vote on that today, just the coordination alone. And then what we want to do with the growth policy after that. Because that's what Kerry White, you didn't go to that meeting with Kerry White?
I was at a meeting with Carrie.
Oh, okay, he's the one that told us to get into our growth policy. You know, he didn't say add all this other stuff, he just said get that in there. We're coming up with these new ideas
Well,
to do.
Like, what kind of motion would you entertain? Because I think we have already decided that our
But
mission.
we haven't voted on it yet, though, to add, to use coordination with the county commission, or the Forest Service, to bring it.
We have it in our bylaws.
We do.
Yes, yeah, we
Yes.
did, we added that, and,
Do we want to put it into our growth policy? Definitely, coordination
Yes.
with the Forest Service, not with just a little.
Sure.
That's what
I
I
think
wanted to
that
vote
goes
on.
without
I would
saying.
like to get that voted on today, is that we get it put into our growth policy about coordination with the Forest Service. I don't know how you'd word it, but
Well,
then we could vote on it later, what we want to, add to that.
could we, put that off a month too?
And why would you want to put that off? Because we know we want it in the growth policy. I want to start moving on this. I've done my homework. I've read this.
Yeah,
We
last-
told everybody to do it,
Yeah,
and we
last
can't
month we
keep putting
did.
it off.
We
You know,
asked
we just
everybody
can't.
to look it over.
I've already did it, and we got to move on. And I would like to vote today that we add coordination to our growth policy in Granite County with the Forest Service. There's already a growth
Well,
policy
that's a
or
good
coordination.
I
did it on the
I will make a motion then, and I move that we, when we finally make recommendations on a growth policy to the commissioners, that the concept of coordination is included in those recommendations.
In the growth policy.
Now explain that again. You mean we're not voting today on putting coordination into our growth policy?
That's exactly what I said.
Is
I
it?
said, I move
Okay,
that when we present our recommendations on a growth policy to the commissioners, that the concept of coordination is included
there you go.
in that.
Okay,
Sounds good.
someone want to second that or move?
Either you or Elena.
I'm not a member, so I
I
can't
know.
do it.
I'm
I'm
not
not a
gonna
member
second it because I don't feel quite comfortable with it until I've read the entire growth policy, although I appreciate what you're saying,
I'll
Bill.
second it. I'll second it.
Okay,
Vote.
so then, do we vote then on whether or not we're going to include the concept of coordination
Yes,
in
let's
our
vote.
growth
All
recommendations?
those in favor say aye.
Oh, she's the,
Everybody put yourself up if you're for it.
Well, you'd have discussion, wouldn't you? You have the motion on the floor, now you have discussion about it.
Well, we might have had the discussion before the motion there.
I think so.
well, I think Elena's right, though, after a motion's made, then you have
Okay.
opportunity for discussion.
All
Okay.
right. Go ahead.
Well, I put it on me, but I'm not that familiar with the growth policy, and I don't think everybody on our committee is, and so I don't feel comfortable voting for it until everybody's really comfortable with the growth policy.
I think everybody understands what coordination was for, though, why we wanted to put it in the growth policy. So we'd have a little more power working with the Forest Service, on forest management. And it was advised to us by Kerry White, and it's pretty plain, why we need it.
Yeah, I guess 95% of what we will be recommending, we don't really come up with a growth policy, right? We make recommendations. The commissioners actually come up with a growth policy. But
Well, planning board.
The planning board, we will just take this to the
okay,
planning board.
so
show them.
95% of what we would recommend on a growth policy is still to be studied and determined. And so I guess I understand why Sue might feel that it's maybe a little premature to decide on one thing that we will include there, but I think that is one thing that's obvious. we've been talking about coordination
We better start moving and getting
from the
stuff
very
done.
first
Well, we're not doing
meeting, and so
anything. Everybody every week
I
doesn't
wouldn't,
do their homework.
I wouldn't feel uncomfortable saying that we would plan on including some thoughts on coordination when we make our recommendations. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
It seems pretty innocuous too. I think even Sue could admit that that's pretty
This is-
innocuous.
After listening to Kerry White, I don't think anything that he says is innocuous, but, you know,
The idea is to just foster communication between the commission and the Forest Service.
That's it.
And,
That's all it
and the
is.
idea is also that the Forest Service in our neck of the woods won't just act unilaterally, that they will have to coordinate with our elected representatives.
And thank God
So
we
That
have that.
seems like something even you would approve of.
Yeah.
now everything comes down from the top. So there's like 20 people in DC, and they're just saying, you all do this. And this takes it and puts it in local hands more, you know, they have to coordinate with us.
I thought we had already agreed that was,
We
and that's
have,
why
we
it's in
have.
our bylaw.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I still am not going to vote for it today, but,
Do we have enough to vote on it today? Elena, you're gonna vote on it?
No, I'm just gonna abstain.
So it's just 3 of us against,
No, I can't vote.
oh, that's
And
right.
And I
It's
can't
just,
vote yet, because I'm not a
it's just
member.
2 against 1 then?
Well, she's not thumbs down. She said she's just thumbs
I
out to
know.
the side.
But you know, we've got to
True.
start moving. We just keep
Yeah.
coming every month and nothing gets
So if
I
she
done.
know-
abstains, I think, yeah, it would be
Yeah.
2 against 1.
I know,
And-
Elena, you had
And
said
they
you
had a
want
whole
us to
month,
get
you know, to
busy
read
and do
this
stuff.
and get
You know,
after
we
it.
need
We don't even have
Can't
the
keep-
bylaws
We got a whole
approved.
month to wait. We gotta move
Where's the
on this.
resolution
We
for
got a
that?
forest that we gotta start taking care of out there. so.
Are our bylaws approved?
Yeah.
yes,
Because
they are.
Elena says they're not.
They're
Yeah.
supposed to, commission is supposed to do a resolution, and they didn't.
Don't look at me. I don't- You're the kid. Okay, do a resolution on that, so. So we don't have enough to vote?
I would say we don't, and just a 2-to-1, I'd be uncomfortable saying
All right.
that we pass something there. But,
All right.
okay, fails for lack of participation. I would like to see that on the agenda for the next meeting.
And it's gonna get
And maybe,
voted on then,
well,
so.
you know, maybe everybody can study up a little bit more on that.
And I think, do you have a growth policy?
You know, I did. My wife could not find I had my
I
little.
gave you mine.
Yes, I
You
had my
can have
little,
mine too.
I had my
Bring it
folder
next month,
right
okay?
next to my
Yes, I got some
bedstand,
stuff
and
in
she,
But
I-
I'm gonna
I
get
hate
one
to
from Linda because-
just blame
do you need
her,
this
but
then?
No, I'm gonna.
she said I might have hustled and
Oh, you don't
bustled
need
that
it.
somewhere.
Okay.
And I just talked to Linda, because I think it's something the committee should provide everybody with, rather than individuals having to hustle up and get their own
All
copy.
right.
You know, and, I know Scott doesn't have one, Margie doesn't have one, and I don't have one, and Linda will get 6, ask her for 6.
Do you know
Beautiful.
when she'll do that?
And I will find out right when we adjourn, I'll just run over. I told her
Okay.
I'd go talk to her at 3:15 if we
Sure.
wanted them. Do you think 6 is an appropriate amount, so we have
Do we
everybody's
have one
copy?
at home, Frank?
Because I thought,
Okay,
okay,
So-
and Patty's got one.
Well, how many members are there?
I
6
think
now?
there's like 8 on it.
Oh, we need to.
no, there's 6 members right now, because Chuck's not a
Okay,
member anymore.
we have to put it in the newspaper, right? That we need a new member in here?
The commissioners do that.
Well, we-
Mike is supposed to do that.
Yeah, Mike said he
He's
told
going on
me.
vacation.
he
Okay,
was
But
going
has
to
he
do
done that yet? or-
Well, can we
Okay.
get this little thing settled? So I will.
Maybe 7, so this
So
will
it's
have an
7,
extra
okay.
for the new member.
Gonna withdraw your motion.
Well, no, it just failed. You know, it went to a vote, but I don't think enough people voted yay. 2 people voted yay, and 2 people abstained.
What do you say?
Elena, why wouldn't you vote today?
Not a member.
I don't understand what we're voting
Nothing
on.
hard
I mean,
enough
I
time
think
to
when
keep
we
your
have it
mouth
in
shut.
front of us, then we can look at that section
Okay.
in the growth policy
Okay, this was
and where we
basically
want to put this
to put the
into.
growth or the coordination in our growth policy plan. That we coordinate, you know, with.
Well, how are you going to put it in? Just put it in coordination? Where are you
No.
gonna put it? That's what I mean. You have to have the growth policy in front of you so you can decide where in that growth policy you want the changes. If there's something already in there about Forest Service or something, you wanna look at that, you wanna add that, you wanna change the wording and doing that.
There is a place on page 57, if you.
But we don't all have it.
Right, and I think we should devote, maybe that should be the theme of our next meeting is going over the growth policy.
That's what it was supposed to be this time.
Right.
Sure,
You
and
know.
we weren't sufficiently prepared, it would
Nobody
appear.
does their homework.
You're
On
right.
page 57, when you get your growth policy,
do, Heidi.
it talks about coordination, but it's coordination
I
with
don't have
just
to look.
local people,
Sure.
nothing, no
Yeah.
government. But we could put coordination right there with the federal government, the Forest Service.
Just
That
put
kind of
a
thing.
can.
Sue, how
We'll
am
have
I,
to
how
decide
am I
how.
going to get a replacement copy of the growth policy
Why
from
don't
you?
I ask her right now and see if she has them available and when, and then people can.
She could give them like to the clerk and recorder, and people could come in and get them at
Right.
their leisure.
Because I don't think she's here.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
And I
Scott
think,
needs another
Sue?
copy.
Yeah.
I don't think it would hurt for our cub reporter to have a copy of that, so maybe we ought to make it 8.
Let's make 8 so we have plenty.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and 57, when we study this, page
Yeah,
57
it mentions
is where you
coordination.
would propose that we
Well, I
would,
don't know if we should put it there. What do you think, Chuck?
Well-
Could that be a good place to put this type of coordination with the
I
Forest
think
Service?
so, but I don't know if
I still think
Oh, I see what you said.
that we should have a meeting or go to the planning board meeting.
You think what?
To go to one of the planning board meetings. Because the growth policy is due to be revised,
Yes, it is,
the whole thing.
yes.
And they're gonna be working on it.
we could send a representative to a planning board meeting and just say, hey, we're
Right.
working on some potential recommendations, some of them might,
I just told her that. I just did that.
yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I told her that when we get what we want, we'll come to her. But we don't have what we want to
I
lay
don't think
out
there's an
here.
argument that we're working on stuff that would be pertinent for the planning
Yeah.
board.
The
to-
reason I did this today, because people have to understand who the Forest Service is that we're gonna be coordinating with. And a lot of people here want to use controlled burns, to put that in, as forest management. I want to show how that can be dangerous. And we
I
get a lot of
kind of
smoke.
liked Chuck's idea, truthfully, and I don't know if we can get Sue to agree with this, but I like Chuck's idea of try to get on every fire, and you won't stop every fire. And those will be, I don't know if they're prescribed, but those will burn because they feel like burning, and we can't get them stopped right away. And that just seemed like a common sense approach.
It is. That's what I want
You know,
too.
and maybe you
And
don't
I
put
want-
the jet airplanes on the fire if it's just starting, but you'd try to do something at the beginning of every fire.
But we need good forest management, job opportunities in Granite County.
Right, I
I'm
don't think-
pushing big time for that.
Sure. Okay.
Before the growth policy, there was a thing called the comprehensive plan for Granite County. Do you remember that?
I don't remember, kind of vaguely.
Yeah, that's what John Spaeth gave me a copy. And it had a lot to do with the lands in Granite County. It was like home rule, but it was a comprehensive.
But it's not good anymore.
The
is
whole
it?
thing had to do with, I think, the Forest Service, the lands
Yeah,
around here.
The timber harvest fell precipitously during the Clinton years. That was what killed the forest industry in Montana. Bill Clinton was just awful
He
for the
was, well, he
forest.
started the President's Council on Sustainable Development,
Yeah.
and it does. It's,
So anyway, we just lost mill after mill after mill, and
Yeah,
I think their idea was all you loggers can serve coffee and crumpets to rich folks, and your tourist economy, maybe you can make, because the government orders it, $15 an hour. Or maybe it'll just be $7 an hour. I don't know. So anyway. All right, so what did she say?
She'll have 8 copies ready Monday at the clerk and recorder's office, and then we can come in at our leisure and pick them up.
Sweet.
Yeah, you're welcome. well, thank her, she's the one that's doing it all.
Well, you should probably let Liza and Margie know.
Yes, right.
So I don't know, you want me to send
I
them
can
a-
call Chuck Lizer, or do you
Okay.
have a contact for
I only
him?
have an email for them, that's it. so-
Okay, I have his phone
Okay.
number.
I'll let Margie know.
Okay.
And
Okay,
if
we'll do it
you
that
get
way.
a hold of Margie, we'll have that, okay, I need to write myself another
I have a
note.
question for, is it coordination you don't like? Or
Oh.
what is it you don't like or
Oh.
not sure?
The timing.
I think about.
I know you
what's
had
that-
questions about coordination a while back.
Right. It's not the word that I dislike, it's just where I see Kerry White, what his vision for Montana is to me short-sighted. I think about Clive and Bundy and those, those folks, and I don't like it.
Okay.
And that's the problem I have. I think about around Plains, those people that are so right-wing. It's just not helpful, and it doesn't even help move things forward. I'm for logging, but I'm also for wilderness. I think we can all come together and agree on lots of stuff. I just don't want us to go too far to the right.
Don't you think we've gone too far to the left, though,
No,
honestly?
I don't think so. I think climate change is what's driving so much of our problems.
Look at the Tillamook fire. They had climate change back then, didn't they? Terrible. There's droughts, and we're seeing that right now.
We used to have droughts, and you think, well, next year
Yeah.
will be better. Well, next year isn't better.
Did you know we're coming in, do you know what a grand minimum is? It's something they see on the sun, and it can tell when the weather is going to change. They said we're coming into a cooling trend in 2020, but because the climate is so hot now, it isn't gonna matter much, it said.
Huh.
So, I don't know, and they can't guarantee it,
Right.
But the last big grand minimum was during the Ice Age, when the Vikings had to leave Greenland, they saw real climatic
Well, we might not
change.
find out about climate change, but maybe our children will, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's hard these drought years, but I will say, I like the way the climate is now. If you go back, I study climate change all the time. I go back 2,000 years ago, up to the present. If you study 1392 up to 1800s in Europe, we haven't seen anything like those people saw with climatic changes. Like in one, the Rhine or Seine River dried up and the ocean came in. They had no more fresh water. They saw things that we couldn't even imagine. We're sitting good, I think, right now, compared to other generations, thousands of years ago, that had to deal with climate change. But,
All right,
Nobody
I'm gonna
likes
get a
it.
hold of Chuck
Right.
Lizer.
Okay.
I hope you guys read those things about the Forest Service, so you see how it evolved. You understand why we're at. And
So where you at, new business?
I don't think we have any really.
I was just gonna mention, and I thought I'd mention it because of, for Margie, since she's doing the agenda, but we will meet here on this place, the courtroom, on the 13th of February. So that's just something I thought might be a good idea to mention it in the meeting,
Right.
so it gets on the agenda, so.
I would like to stress too, when you bring ideas to put in our growth policy, let's just keep it for forest management, nothing else, because we don't want to change it too much, what we want.
And then I just was gonna say the resolutions. Like I said, the resolutions for the budget has to be approved by the commissioners. I think the bylaws. And I noticed that yesterday on the agenda, you met with, did you meet yesterday or last week with the Forest Service? Oh, yeah, yesterday.
They didn't show up,
They didn't show up. I still,
good coordination.
as a suggestion, I still think they should meet with us,
The Forest
the
Service.
Forest Service.
For here?
They should meet with us and tell us what they're doing.
I think that's a great idea.
Right?
Let us
Whatever
know
you
what's
want.
going on with timber sales.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Because we're supposed to be a group that they're supposed to be dealing with.
No, commission.
Really? Then what are we for?
We advise the county commissioners.
How do we advise them if we don't know what the fire service is doing?
It's what we want the Forest Service to do.
How do we
It's not
know what they're doing?
It's- They're not doing nothing, is how we
But what
want
I'm
to-
saying is, how do we know what they're doing if they don't meet with us and tell us what this,
We can see
what they're doing?
Helena. We know what Forest Service sales they
You're
promote.
missing my point.
You know, I guess I am.
Actually, we talked at a couple of different meetings about having somebody from the Forest Service come. And my recollection is, I told you guys that I had talked to Cameron
Yeah.
Razor about it, and that he had this other meeting that occurs at the same exact time as our meeting. And I thought at the time, we decided that when we were ready to have somebody come from the Forest Service, maybe we'd change the day of our meeting or something to accommodate. Now,
I agree with
That's-
Bill. That's my recollection.
Mine too.
you know, and maybe we ought to have a few more decisions or lack of decisions under our belt.
Yesterday, and they didn't show up.
Well, that could be an entire meeting with Cameron. It'd be too much to have Cameron and growth policy at the same meeting.
I'd like to ask him what the new regulations are gonna be.
I
now
think
with this
he told
executive
me
order, you know.
he'd be happy to come in and we could just ask questions.
That would be
Just be a
nice.
question and answer. And I think it'd be beneficial to us. And then maybe we could fill him in just briefly on, you know, what kind of a general direction we're going. We don't have any, you know, specific recommendations for the commissioners yet, but at some point, I'm guessing we will.
We can tell them our concerns too, that, you know,
Sure.
things we don't
So-
like about what they're doing.
Because I know when I did go to the commissioners' meetings and they'd be there, I mean, the complexion of the commissioners' meeting before, they didn't know what was going on. So they just sat there and listened to whatever the Forest Service said. So I thought, we're the educational committee, we get the information, we look into it, and then we can present it to the commissioners to discuss it intelligently
We
with the
might end up
Forest
doing
Service.
some coordinating.
That's right.
Is there any way Cameron could have a representative come in?
Well, yeah, and that would be
Instead
a
of him?
possibility. I'd rather have Cameron myself.
Who is the ranger out there?
Cameron,
Cameron, how old is he?
well, I don't know,
He's in his
40,
40s.
45.
Is he like, does he have a degree in forestry?
He was the
or-
road guy there or something.
He was,
you know.
range
Right.
and weeds
Manager?
and,
You mean range? What do you mean range?
Towns.
Oh.
yeah, rangeland.
Range management.
And
kinda.
weeds, things like that.
Does he have any degree in forestry at all, or?
Don't know that, but a couple of the low-level people out there say they've been pleasantly surprised, that they were a little worried when he was coming in, and they've been pleasantly surprised.
Didn't he help fight that fire last summer too, and he kinda got after it?
You know, I don't know. I do know, though, that he has had some, what I would consider reasonable requests, like of his superiors, and they haven't always granted those to him. You know, one specifically was, let's get those trails cleared, and let's use power tools to do it because it's so much safer. And his boss, the gal in Dillon, said, sure, that sounds great. And she had been delegated the right to make that decision by the regional forester. And then the gal in Dillon went to the meeting of all her fellow wizards in Missoula, and these people from the other forests were aghast and agog and amazed. And so she came back, she said, whoa, sorry, Cameron, I got overruled. It's the way I heard it. But I was impressed that he would go to bat for his trail guy. Because anytime you want to do anything except fight a fire, you're just asking for trouble in the Forest Service. There isn't anything you can do that isn't asking for a lawsuit, except go fight a fire,
Oh, let 'em burn.
Let them burn and then
go watch a fire.
watch a fire.
So, I don't know, Bill, if you were at that meeting, but Scott Adler said that they were having a big timber sale in Granite County? Like, wasn't it 5 or 6
I was
million?
gonna find this stuff out yesterday.
Board feet, were you at that meeting? It was,
Yeah.
I mean, that sounded positive, I thought.
Yes, I was gonna tell you another time that the Forest Service hurt us, you know, it was kind of a controlled burn. We got 6 million, that 6 million board feet reminded me, we got a sale of Coal Creek, about 1970. And it was 6 million board feet, we logged it, we also bought all the dead firewood up there. We had to pay stumpage on it, we cut it, skidded it, you know, it cost just as much to harvest it as it does a green log. We had 40 loads, logging truck loads of dead wood. Joe went up to haul it out, they had done a controlled burn and they burned every one of them down. Joe went in to see the Forest Service, they said, sue us. But you know, with that tort law, you can't do anything. So, that was a shame, you know,
Yeah,
all that
is
money.
a shame. So you can't ever sue the Forest Service?
There's a federal tort act.
So
You
how-
can sue, but they say, sue, you can go ahead and sue me, but we're not gonna let you win. It's kinda like that. And a lot of it's settled if they do go to court and people do sue. It goes down to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Right. So you can't sue?
You can try, but
Right, okay.
But then you have to pay all the money for your lawyer's costs, you
Right.
know, and so it's not worth it, but, I don't know. That's why we need coordination, that, we have some say against the federal government, that's why they put it into these land policies, to give us some
Well,
kind of
I don't think there's anybody at this table that would disagree that it's poor policy to pay a bunch of money to gather up a bunch of firewood and get it ready to move out to warm people's homes and then just burn it up,
Yeah,
you know. So a mistake was made there.
Yeah.
yes, it was,
A mistake was made.
a
So-
costly one for us, you know. Okay, I guess we're not gonna do much till the next meeting. So what do you guys wanna do the next meeting, just to get this straight? You wanna read your growth policy. Now, why are you doing that? To see what kind of changes you wanna make in it? For different policies, or?
Well, right, I just think.
Because I didn't wanna do a whole lot of change.
Right, and I think we are specific to the forest, but I think you do have to take it in context of the entire document, you know, we don't wanna, you know, okay.
I
I'm glad
understand.
we've taken steps to supply everybody with a copy of the growth policy, and I swear on Scout's honor.
Also,
I
You
will
kids get it done.
I'll read that separate.
I've been studying all this stuff
I
for a
know,
month,
keep us
ready.
after school.
So,
Well,
I
I-
have a couple things. Or
I'm
were you
sorry.
gonna say something?
I just wanted to say, you know, I'm sure some of you've seen the email that I send out. It says GMAC, or it says something about that, and it goes to everybody. And I think you can send that to tell everybody to pick up the growth policy on Monday from Linda, and that's what we're gonna discuss for the next
Right,
agenda
it'll actually be
meeting.
down at the clerk and recorder's office.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
at the
right,
clerk and
'cause she's there
recorder.
for it.
are they having it made up like this
That, I
nice,
don't know, but
or-
she's gonna have color, she said,
Okay.
so,
These are pretty nice.
right, that is nice.
So this way, everybody will have it, and they know what to expect, not a week before when the agenda comes out, but they'll know
Right,
to look at it and make suggestions and come up with wording or whatever.
right.
You see that email you sent out that, smoke on, plants?
Yes,
Harmful effect? That's pretty-
I printed that out too. Smoke does hurt, the leaves on plants. It's very hard, you know, and that's why I don't like controlled burns, because there we get smoke, you know, we got tourism, you know, we got kids that gotta breathe it. But you know what? Honestly, I don't think you can log it or burn it. It's too late. I think we're gonna see a catastrophic fire someday. It's just gonna be unbelievable, just like,
Good, California.
yeah, I just worry about that. It's too little, too late, I think. And are there enough mills to handle all the lumber, like, you know, the logs, like in California there isn't, you know, it's just, and there are not that many loggers, you know, like it used to be. Nobody wants to go into that field anymore because there's no promise of work, you know, and that's too bad.
That is true, I don't see a lot of people clamoring to be loggers or to work in a mill. I mean,
No.
that's just a reality.
You know? Did you know there's less blue-collar workers now than ever? Everyone's going to college, getting a degree, and, you know, and white-collar
Yeah.
workers, and,
Right.
well, there's gotta be balance to that too, you know. And Sherman Anderson, did you know that he has, he sends a bus over to Butte, this is Sun Mountain
Uh-huh.
down there, to the mill. He sends a bus over to Butte, picks up these, they're kinda not really prisoners,
Oh, they're like pre-release.
might be something like that. But he shifts them over and they do the night shift there at his mill and he sends them back. And they love it, you know,
Right.
and actually they're really good workers. He said they do a good job. But there's just a shortage of mill workers, loggers, and I don't know.
Well, you look at the blue collar, when the oil business was really booming, those kids could go over there and work 2 weeks on and make a fortune,
Oh, they
and 2
could.
weeks off.
Yeah,
It's hard to compete with that.
it is. That's exactly right.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, maybe with the president's executive order about forest management, so maybe something will change.
I think if we could get where we do get logging again and get some mills opened up, I would like to see biomass mills, but I
oh,
don't
did
know.
you, don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
There's a thing on 60 Minutes. Did you guys see that the other night?
I did.
This guy, this scientist, has developed this thing where he can make fuel from like biomass.
Yeah,
And
you
I
can.
thought about the loggings. It just seemed really positive. So look at 60 Minutes from last Sunday.
All right.
They're,
Do you know in Europe they do this
Yeah.
already? They
It-
don't waste a blade of anything over there. It all goes
Right.
into biomass or anything. I think this has been tried before, hasn't it, in this community, but it just never really flies, you know, but maybe it's time we
Well,
reinvent it, you know?
Right, I
and
mean,
get
this
it going.
seemed like it had possibilities. I just
Yeah.
had a couple of things, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
You know, I finally got a hold of the guy at the DNRC, and since we're collaborative, if the commissioners want to get money from the DNRC to help fund our group, I have the guy's name to talk to.
Who did you talk to?
Matt Arno.
Oh, okay.
But it's gotta come from the commissioners. And it has to be a collaborative group. And then, so the commissioners will advertise the position that's open, is that what I understand? And the
Mhm.
commissioners will appoint?
A new person.
Yeah, okay, that's,
I'm surprised they'd have to do it because they already got a whole pile of people that want to.
right, I bet people
but,
have to resubmit if they want.
I guess so. Well, who does that? Who resubmits the name?
What's that?
Like Heidi has to put her name in and we have to put it in the paper?
And Mike, I think
Mike
Mike
will-
said.
Mike Cahill will do
Goes to
that?
Mike, yeah.
Right,
Maybe I should remind him to get that in by Monday. then.
Yeah,
So-
he told me.
Oh, Scotty,
he
you,
will,
okay.
or, yeah,
You can tell me.
yeah, you can tell Scott to.
Yeah, and to get it in the paper and talk to Mike Cahill about it, what to put in.
But he
He's
mentioned
going
there
on
were some other
vacation.
groups.
Who's going on
to me.
vacation?
Mike,
Oh, good.
Well, then,
Maybe,
well,
maybe you should go down and talk with him after the meeting.
Kim Pollock, then she does that, when Mike's gone, so.
Yeah, we should,
Yeah.
yeah, why don't we just stop in, yeah.
so what other resolution did you want?
The budget
I
and
got
the
the bylaws.
And the budget.
And the budget.
So you have a copy of the bylaws to
Yeah.
present, and it's got the thing about coordination, because the original ones didn't.
It does, doesn't our bylaw, it mentions coordination.
Hmm?
You do, I mean, I'm questioning just to make sure you do.
What? I think so.
I mean, I don't see it in this one here, but
The one we approved. it
the
had
one we
coordination.
approved, and it's on my computer at home,
Yeah.
why don't I just go ahead and send that to you, just so that,
Make sure.
yeah, you have everything up to date.
Could you send me a new one? I
Sure.
lost mine, thank you.
Yeah,
Just email it to me. and I'll
This is
send
the
it back.
bylaws you're talking about?
right.
Okay.
And Elena, I think you were gone at that meeting, it was the last meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't here. But again, the Facebook, I know it's not formal or government-approved, whatever you want to call it, but anybody can post on it, information, you know.
If
I've
we
been
know how to-
posting stuff.
If we know how to do it.
Well, you just, subscribe to it, and then you can
Okay.
comment on it. If you got articles and stuff to put it up, and you can put the bylaws on there, the draft of the bylaws to be, until the commissioners put something up on the website, where we can have everything there.
Right. I'll send the bylaws out to everybody, and then maybe Elena, you can post it.
Okay.
Getting back to that timber sale, is a Granite County
And
Commission
Sue,
gonna post it?
Yeah.
Did they
Anything
already
else
post
that
it
you
then?
wanna, you know, an
6 million
article or anything,
for a
Okay.
Forest
and I'll
Service
put it
sale?
up there.
Did they-
Thank you. I
they're gonna
appreciate
put up
that.
6
Yeah,
million
'cause
square
I-
feet
from all
for timber
sides.
sale
I know you are. I
in Granite
appreciate that
County?
very
Is that what
much.
Scotty said?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Or did you, where did you hear that?
No,
There was
he-
gonna be,
We
a
don't
tax
know,
sale?
we don't know, I mean, that's in limbo.
Oh.
We were gonna find out yesterday,
Oh,
and the Forest Service didn't show up, we said
I
we're
see.
gonna leave it.
but they wanted to
They were on
post
the agenda.
6 million board feet though.
Well, that's what Scott Adler had said.
No,
you know,
I was
like
supposed to
several
be
months
16,
ago.
I questioned it.
16 million?
I thought it
Board
was
feet?
5 or 6.
I had it in the minutes from before, but I can't remember how much.
16 million, that'd be a big one.
Yeah.
See, that'd make everybody happy.
It's on YouTube.
So we didn't know, we talked about it yesterday, and we were gonna find out.
I just don't know why they can't, when you do a timber sale, why you can't arrange it in the forest, you know, with the way the winds blow, you know, that time of year where you have your fire, why not do strips, like the fire line, you know, do a bunch of logging that way, so when the fire goes into it, puts itself out. They don't do it that way
Because they don't
though.
want to, I
It's
suppose.
just, there's gotta be a better way of this forest management, you know, to save it, but,
So, agenda items for next time?
oh, well, we'll be working on the growth policy again, I imagine, huh? Let's just leave it at that, just that one.
Yeah, I think the growth policy, and then maybe we'll have a report back as far as what the commissioners did on those couple of things, like the,
Oh, I'm sure we can get that.
yeah, sure,
No problem.
okay.
Okay, if that's, does anybody else have anything they wanna add? Okay, I
In that
guess-
case, I would
Make a
move,
motion?
Can I,
I would
Oh,
can
move,
I as
Scotty?
a member of the public
Yes, you may. Oh, we didn't do the public speaking. Speak,
ask a
Scotty.
couple of questions?
Yes,
and
go ahead.
Perhaps make a comment? Coming from a part of the country where my 43 years career in forest management had fire and its effects on the forest ranking down probably near the bottom of concerns. I have a couple of questions, and first is, how much do invasive plant species come into play in terms of their infiltration into the forest after a fire, or is that a concern out here?
Big concern.
Yeah.
Big concern,
I
okay.
think that's addressed in the executive order that President Trump
Okay.
put out.
Because
It
I
talked
know,
about invasive
I know
species.
it's a chief concern in the Northeast. So,
That's why we seed our skid trails right away with really great grass seeds for wildlife and cattle. And
try to
one
choke
year,
out those weeds.
I was so upset. I worked so hard, and I do it by hand. I go up these skid trails, and I just really pour it on. I go back the next year to see it. It was all these horrible thistles. The weeds, or the seeds I used, the mill bought a cheap version of it. It wasn't stuff we bought. It was terrible. I was so mad.
so given
Yeah.
the potential impact that non-native invasive species can have on these environments, that might be something for this committee to consider.
That's good.
Yeah, it can
Good-
happen
great
either
point.
in logging or fires, you know, that, it just open soil,
Great
you
point,
know.
yeah.
it comes in. That's a good one, because we don't want that.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, how much can a mechanized operation replace fire as a management tool? And at the same time, how much can a mechanized operation in the forest be utilized as a way to control some of these issues such as
They
invasive
can, they
species?
can do a really good job. In fact, if they had the equipment we had back in 1910, they could have logged a lot different, you know, a lot more timber, managed it, but they use, a lot of times they use these old things to skid with, and, you know, they just couldn't move
So
them.
where I'm going with this, obviously, is that if you can utilize a mechanized operation to replace many of the aspects of fire as a management tool, maybe that is something we should,
That's
as
what
a
I'm
committee,
pushing
should
for,
be
so I am
advocating
pushing
for.
for that.
Yeah.
I hate
More of-
fire in any form, I do, I push for that.
But Scott, you have, maybe you didn't notice, but we have some really steep mountains around here, and not all of it can be accessed. And as
True.
far as helicopter logging, that's kind of a thing of the past, isn't
We've
No.
done it. Oh, no.
Well,
And you can
there
do
you go.
line logging. In Oregon, they log really steep. They use darters and
it?
line
Right,
logging.
but that's not very,
We've
that's-
used that too.
that's very destructive. though.
Well, I think what Scott's
it's not.
doing is,
Actually,
is
it's
No, it's
nice.
not.
You
If
just
you're
bring the
doing it
logs
right.
up, no skid trails or anything. It actually is nice.
You're thinking of the old line logging they did over in this
Right, when they
neck of
drive,
the woods,
right.
with the jammer roads, they're called
Uh-huh.
jammer roads.
Yeah, I
Every
know.
200 feet, they put a road across the slope.
Okay.
And that's out. And this is
Okay.
about the only part of the country they did that.
Okay,
And I worked on skyline sails that were a mile long.
uh-huh,
So you could have a road here and you can be logging a mile. They weren't real feasible, but they
Right.
put them on. But, you know, we did 2,000 feet from a road, easy, you know, you just
Scott,
gotta do it right.
Kurt,
yeah.
And
aren't
gotta
you
have, like,
basically
here,
saying this should be
it's
things
hard to
that we
do
should
that
bring up
because
in
you make
discussion,
holes.
Yes.
look
Yeah,
into?
holes.
I think that's what
Because
his
that's a
point
lot of
is,
weight on
is that we should
Right.
bring it up for discussion. and look
some
into
of the
it.
trees aren't big enough here to tell.
So that's
No,
what I
I'm-
think his point is.
I'm well versed enough with the topography out here to know that you're not going to be able to do that in every situation. There's going to
Uh-huh.
be areas that are either too wet or too steep to be able to
Or rocky or,
employ
yeah.
that. But where you can, if it's an economical option, if it's an option economically, and even in some cases, if the economics outweigh the environmental detriments to using fire, that might be something that this committee would look into as a,
I tried to point that out to senators, representatives, and I call it timber suitable land, is what, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause not all land is timber suitable, you know, and you got the wilderness stuff,
Yeah.
and then you got the steep stuff and the wet stuff, and along the creeks. But you have, like you said, a lot of land that you can go in there and manage it, and with mechanical equipment nowadays, I mean, you can almost totally mimic fires, you know, as far as what you want to get back, you know, and it's a whole lot more, less destructive than, well, they won't burn up.
Let's not forget our air quality too. You know, the air is clear now, we're not choking on the smoke. Fires poison us, it poisons our kids, it's terrible. And I don't want that in Granite County, because we have tourism, and a lot of people just aren't gonna wanna come if we have fires that are just left to burn, so.
Unless they're slash piles, then it's okay.
No, that's what you have a good point, Sue, I wanna put that in, or ranchers burning up their fields and
Right, right.
irrigation
But I-
districts, you know?
But I mean, I see
We're
some.
not attacking those people, you know,
Right, but smoke is smoke, I mean, you
Yeah,
know.
there's a whole lot less smoke on a slash pile,
fact-
especially when you have to burn it in the fall during,
and we
windy
have an air
conditions
quality, we
where
can't do it at
you
certain
dissipate
times. It
smoke.
has to-
Right, but I know a couple years ago, after we had a terrible fire season, the slash burning down by Clinton, it just hung in there, and it was just as bad as
They
the
probably weren't
fires.
supposed to burn when they
Maybe
did.
not,
No,
maybe
they're
not,
not
Was
supposed
that
to.
slash burning or prescribed burn?
Logging slash burn.
I don't know to tell you the truth, I think
Yeah.
it was probably slash,
But I'll tell
but
you,
I'm not 100%.
it's on ranchers' land that we do this, you know,
Yeah.
so they make wealth off of their land, and this is how it's done, you know.
I
And we don't wanna hurt Granite County people.
Right, I'm just pointing out a little hypocrisy there. But Scott, I don't know if you've lived here to understand what some people think, the strong passions that they have for the mountains.
Well, we have
And,
too.
right, in
I
it,
have.
right, I think we all
Time to go.
have, but there's, different ways to look at it.
I have gone up all down Rock Creek, asked all the ranchers. I've gone through all the stores in town, all my neighbors out on Rock Creek. What do you want? They want it logged. They're tired of the smoke, they're tired of the fires, and they want some common sense, they want jobs in Granite County. That's what the people in Granite County want. Now, the people you talk to are environmentalists that are passionate about these.
Point
They
of
don't live-
order, this
Huh?
was public comment, point of order. I mean, we're dragging this out and having a discussion again, and it's just public comment.
What's wrong with that?
It was public comment.
It is public comment, we're
started
just
by-
Well, that's
talking.
all that it's supposed to be, is a public comment, you know? That's it, you take it, and then you just say, that's something we should look into, good idea, and then any more public comment, is not, you know, I don't know, I mean, I've
think
gone
there's
to a,
nothing- Elena, there's nothing wrong with us talking and getting our feelings out. You know?
well, I don't know what this mechanical stuff is.
It's logging, is what it is.
So what's the difference between what he's bringing up and what you do?
Nothing, exactly the same,
So then there,
yeah.
so then what's there to discuss?
No, but I was conversing with Sue on people she discussed, you know, they're passionate about the mountains. I think everybody here is. But,
The only other comment I wanted to make is that, at least in my reading of the coordination process between a local government and a federal agency, if you're going to have any chance of involving the federal agency at all, at least in this case, you're going to have coordination in some shape or form as part of the growth policy.
exactly.
Otherwise, in the immortal words of Blaine Bradshaw, the Forest Service can tell the commissioners to go pound sand.
That's right. That's why we're bringing it in. That's
Yeah.
why we want to get it
So,
in our growth policy.
Good point.
That's what Kerry White said. Get it in there, you know, and you got power.
so, end of my public comments.
Taken.
Okay, then. I will move to adjourn if there's nothing else.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, we're done.
There we go.
Everybody do their homework
Yeah, we will.
and read about the Forest Service. You'll understand why it's